Thank you so much for doing this again, Rick. Obviously, I've got this. Where's the camera? This wonderful book in front of me. Quite moving in a way, in that you've got the introduction there where you talk about the start of the band, the first single in the city. And then as you go through the book, there's the build up to 1982, and then the year comes to pass. It really is quite a remarkable time for the Jam.
Yeah, I mean, it was, to be honest, it wasn't an easy book to write. I mean, when I wrote my autobiography, I just focused on the really good stuff that happened with the band, and probably what most people remember about the band from a sort of external point of view. So sort of tackling this issue of 1982 and why the band split up was quite difficult, because I had to cast my mind back to what exactly was happening in that year. It was a bit emotional because I had to sort of remind myself of the really strange situation that we found ourselves in. The optimism that we started the year with, and we'd got to a point where we'd obviously established ourselves in more than just Britain as an act and etc. And we didn't really have to struggle quite so much to prove ourselves. As we still pushed ourselves, don't get me wrong. As far as, we didn't really want to stand still. I mean, all our albums were very different because of that sort of attitude of, wanting to do something different and do something which moved the band forward. We still had that drive within us. And then to suddenly find that that Paul decided that was it, when we knew that there was lots more in us, both myself and Bruce. And I think anybody who looked at the progress of the band knew that there was so much more. We hadn't really reached, I don't think, any sort of end game, as far as, we were still selling records. We were still doing really well in the concerts. They were still selling tickets there. There was still a lot of interest in the band. We were still giving our everything to it. So, yeah, it was, when you asked the question, what on earth could go wrong now? Do you know what I mean? It was a very strange sort of scenario in that year to to think back on, and to sort of try and write about it in a way, not looking back. Because a lot of people who contributed to the book simply looked back on it. I don't think they really put themselves in the place that they were at the time. There's a lot of retrospective thinking, which is easy to do, hindsight and everything. So, but fair enough. That's the way it is. That, from my point of view, I really wanted to get it across about how we felt at the time, and the sort of shock, I suppose, in a way, that this was happening. And it was quite a shock, I think, for everybody concerned.
Just prior to 82, 81, you've got the band at their peak. You've got tracks like Funeral Pyre. Your drumming on that track alone is just phenomenal. And as you're reading in the book, you've got what's going on in relation to the politics, the reference to a really harsh winter in 1981. And then you go into the studio and start recording The Gift, and you've got those photos, the context. You really start to get the atmosphere and that anticipation as we're about to enter the year.
It is a real difficult one to. I remember one thing that struck me immediately when I put myself back into 1982 was how we just got on with it. Do you know what I mean? We spoke about this, about Paul leaving, and then we just got back into what we were doing. We immersed ourselves in the recording that we were, because it was in a recording studio where Paul made the announcement. We got straight back into that, straight back into work, and it was almost not mentioned again. The reasons why Paul wanted to leave. I mean, I think that was the thing that I think people still scratch their heads over today, is the reason. There was no reason. There was no great scheme. I mean, the reason that Paul gave us about why he wanted to leave the band in that initial meeting was rubbish, basically. He said that he felt like he was on a treadmill, and that he wanted to get off. But this was a treadmill that we wanted to get on. We always wanted to get on. We fought so hard to get on it. So to find somebody in the band saying, well, I want to get off now, you think, well, that's crazy. That's mad. And of course, the first thing he went and did was got onto a very similar treadmill. He re-signed with Polydor Records before the band had split, and just carried on the same treadmill. So that didn't make any sense from the get-go. And then when we heard in 1983, in the year after we split, that Paul had given it this sort of fairy story of, I wanted the band to mean something. And I mean, I just thought to myself, it just struck me that there was something wrong here. This was not a valid reason. I think I know what the reason was. I think a lot of it had to do with how the band was managed, because there was a lot of questions being asked about why is it that John and Paul had all this money and me and Bruce didn't have very much at all. There was this first and second class citizen thing happening within our own band, and we were beginning to ask questions. Why am I driving around in this wreck of a car and I can't get out of Top of the Pops without the car breaking down, and just things like that. And also on the other side of it, how we very gentlemanly accepted the fact that if Paul wanted to leave, we could deal with that. There was not a problem with that at all. If that's what he wanted to do, he was perfectly entitled to call it a day and to walk away from it. What I think annoyed me especially was the rubbish that was talked about. He did it for some grand design. I'm sorry, but that's just not holding any water with me at all. The more I think about it, and the more people ask me over the years, and I'm sure they've asked the same thing of Bruce's, why did this happen? It wasn't musical differences. It wasn't wanting to move on. There was because the Jam, I think, had stepped up to the mark and evolved in every possible way, musically and songwriting, and we tried lots of different things. We brought in brass sections. We were probably one of the most flexible bands in the world at the time, to be able to sort of move to different areas and styles, and as a band that's working with itself, myself and Bruce as a rhythm section, I think we contributed a lot to the sound of the band, and I think that was a stark realization when you listen to Style Council stuff, how bland it sounds to me anyway. So I don't think there's any real sort of bitterness why Paul wants to leave. Fine, that's absolutely fine. We could live with that. I think what annoys me, like I say, really more than anything else, was the rubbish that was talked, as if there was something to be covered up about why he was leaving. And I think a lot of it was to do with the way that the band was managed, the way that it was sooner or later was going to, not to be too blunt, but I think the shit would have hit the fan sooner or later. And I don't think he really wanted to be in that scenario. So I think he pulled the plug first. That's the only logical explanation. If you think of discard all the other arguments that don't seem to hold water, that one seems to be the most logical reason, really. Fine. It's just because there was a lot that happened afterwards, why we had to take the Wallace to court, and the difficulty we had getting our royalties, and it was almost like somebody had whispered in Paul's ear that you're the band, you're the only one that's worth anything here, which was, I don't know. There's a lot of, you can speculate. This is the problem. There's been so much speculation about the reasons why all these things came about. I think another thing that sort of came to my mind was we used to look back on bands in the 60s and think, look at all these mistakes these bands have made over, some management's run off with all the money. That wouldn't happen to us. You know what I mean? And I think there's certainly a good story to be told for people who are forming bands now, that a good piece of advice is to learn the business, to know what you're entitled to, and to know about the royalties and the different sorts of royalties that come in from a band, and to know the business. A lot of people learn their instrument and the stagecraft and etc. like that, but to actually learn the music industry and the business and the way it's run is I think just as important really for somebody's career to know how to, it's almost like business school, I suppose, in a way. So maybe there's a sort of a tale to be told there that people coming into the industry should learn a lot about the industry as well as learning their own instrument.
When you look at 1982, you were the biggest band in Britain. A Town Called Malice, arguably the biggest Jam single, and you've got your drums, Bruce's bass, propelling that track. You really were at that peak, and when you compare that song alone to the very start of your career, the sound has continued to evolve. So you were at your commercial and creative peak in a way.
Yes, I think we were very proud of the fact that not one album is the same as any other album. I think we markedly moved on from In the City to Modern World, especially. That became a bit of a shock to the record company because they just wanted it. They wanted the first album repeated. They wanted another version of that because that sold well. So they thought, oh, we'll do the same thing again. That'll be good. And we weren't really going to do that. We felt that there was other things that we wanted to do. And you do get a lot of bands that do that. They sort of get themselves in this. It's like a trench. This works. I'm going to stay here. You know what I mean? And you don't go out of your comfort zone, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. But I think bands should come out of their comfort zone. They should explore their extremes. I mean, we didn't get it right all the time. I mean, there were some songs that we did that were maybe a little bit questionable, really. But we always had the core of what the Jam was about to fall back on and to return to home base, if you like, and then start looking out and exploring, different ways, bringing in brass players and steel bands and backing vocals and trying to expand what was. I mean, the Jam was a 4-piece band, but with only 3 members, and the reason that I think we looked at it like that is because we always wanted to be a 4-piece band. We could never get a 4th member. So we tried very hard to sound like a 4-piece band. When we were on stage, there's nowhere to hide with a 3-piece. If anybody stops for any reason, you know about it, and we sort of took advantage of that. And I think musically there are, I think that shows. I think I quite admire 3-piece bands because I know how difficult it is to make it sound full and interesting. And without sort of you get a 5-piece band, you get lazy keyboard players, and you get as you get people who just sort of drop out. Well, I won't do a guitar solo now. Do you know what I mean? And all this. But I think the 3-piece you really have to pull your weight. So there's a certain discipline about 3-piece. So I think that sort of reflects in us driving ourselves to explore different musical parts of it.
Yeah, and even with Malice, it was a double A side, and the fact that you were on Top of the Pops and did Precious and Malice in one show, that mustn't have been done many times.
I don't think it. I think maybe the Beatles did it. I'm not absolutely sure on this, but yeah, it was a real honour for them to say that to us because they don't normally let you do that. I mean, if you release a double A side, they never liked it. They said, well, you've got to pick one of the songs to sort of shine the light on. But they let us do that, and yeah, it's an amazing thing. I mean, obviously, Town Called Malice was the main song there, but yeah, I think because of the success the band had, and even the BBC sort of recognised that, to actually let us do that was just fabulous.
Yeah, when you have Town Called Malice, and then actually another song that from that era that was a big single, just who is the 5 o'clock hero. Both of those songs take an element of working class life, Paul's lyrics, and that resonated for the whole band, given your background and also the fans' background.
Yes, I mean Paul's lyrics were absolutely fantastic. I mean I think that's where why people still relate to it, and in some ways still relate to it to this day, because it still resonates with people. There's something in there because Paul was a great observer of life going on around. It wasn't preaching anything in particular. It was just observing and saying, well, look, this is me. This is what I see from my position. Songs like Man in a Corner Shop and what have you. They're just fabulous little stories and scenarios that are I think they're just so well displayed in the lyrics. And it was great to have something like that to try and propel it musically, to find something musically that sort of supported that lyric. It was so. Yeah, it was no doubt that Paul was, I think, at his peak in that time anyway, with his songwriting and with the lyrics. So yeah, I mean, I think this sort of comes into the realm of when people talk about the band getting back together again, because there was such a momentous, there was a momentum rather that was built up over the band evolving and the way that we worked and et cetera, that once that was broken, I don't think you could ever stitch that back together again. I mean, if the band was ever going to get together and do anything, which I can't see ever happening, it would simply be going over old ground. And I think that's a real shame that connection, that sort of drive was literally dumped, which was a real shame. I think it was almost an act of musical vandalism to split the band up at the time.
I mean, as a drummer in that time, we just discussed just who is the 5 o'clock hero, but the drums on that song, as an example, you were really pushing the boundaries of what you could do to meet the needs of songs like that.
Yeah, I'm not the greatest drummer in the world, but I did sort of take a leaf out of Ringo Starr's book, was that he knew, and I think he realized, that the song is the star, right? Not anything else. It's not somebody trying to be, the best drummer in the world or the best bass player in the world or the best guitarist in the world, which Paul certainly isn't the greatest guitarist player in the world for all his skills as a songwriter. None of us were really outstanding musicians in a lot of ways, but I think we were trying to be as inventive as we possibly could, so that we worked well together as a band. And that's what bands are about. It's not individuals, it's actually working together, which makes that sound, which makes it work, which I think is, you can put the same cake together with different ingredients and it isn't the same cake. You can try everything else, and I think that's what makes a great band, really. And I think bands like the Beatles, dare I say, and and ourselves, it is the sum of the parts that makes the jam, and there's no other way of doing it.
March of '82, there was the release of The Gift. What are your reflections looking back on that album as a whole? Because, as you said, the sound and what you continued evolve. So sometimes it's hard to rank albums such because they are quite different.
Yeah. Sorry, I lost the thread of your question now.
Just what your reflections on The Gift as an album in the Jam back catalogue. What are your thoughts on that as a whole?
I don't know. I think for a start, we went back to a more simpler way of doing it. We were very good at working with ourselves. We knew instantly whether something wasn't working or was working. So, and of course, it was quite a straightforward album in as much as that, right, we're not going to have any there's no overproduction. There's not a huge amount of overthought on overdubs or what other elements we might want to bring into it. We're sort of going right back to basics. And we're just doing it as it was naturally felt as possible for us to do an album. And that's that's what we ended up with. It's difficult to sort of, when you're working on an album, to try and figure out what it's going to end up like. We just did song by song, and like we always did. And when it's finished, you sort of look at it and you think, oh, I wish I'd have done something different, or wish I'd done something else. I think that's always there. But I think we, by that time, knew whether we were happy with what we were doing or not. For all its maybe faults or whatever there might have been within it. I think it's you're so close to the trees that you don't see it. Do you know what I mean? You don't see the wood. It's just it's very difficult to listen to an album with fresh ears after having worked on it, on the little minuscule bits of it that you do, to stand back from it and just listen to it in any sort of, I mean, it's nice these days, after not playing something for maybe 5 or 10 years, pull it out and listen to it. It's almost like you think, wow, it's like fresh ears to be able to do that. And you think, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, or it's so that's nice. And I think it's nice when people say that they still like it, they still listen to it. I think if it's past that test of time, I think it's done all right. I think we were doing something right.
And in the Jam 1982, there's some fantastic photos, many of which people haven't seen before. Some of which is you and the band backstage on the coach in hotel. Some of those by Neil Twink Tinning. Had you seen all of those photos before? Did any of those come as a surprise?
No, I mean I had a lot of them I had seen, because Neil Twink is a good friend of mine, and he came on the road with us for the last 18 months of the band. He was, did a lot of photography backstage, which was brilliant because it wasn't the sort of photo shoot for, NME or anything like that, where we all stand in a line and look miserable or whatever. These are more sort of candid shots. That one on the front cover, for instance, taken in the corridor of the Sobel Centre in 1981. It's one of the last shows we did in 1981, where we're just talking about what our second encore was going to be. I think that just, for me, it just conjures up memories of we did that a lot. We suddenly decided that the night had gone so well that we do a second encore or even a first encore, and we hadn't really thought about, well, what should we do? What numbers can we pull up? What do we fancy doing? So those sort of moments are really good, and it's quite exciting because you suddenly think, do you know what? We haven't done this one. They haven't done this song for ages. Let's just go and do it. And you think, oh, I hope I can remember how it goes, But that gives it a sort of element of danger when you get into that situation. So that photograph sort of re-evokes that for me, anyway. But it's those sort of photographs that they're not really sort of press shots as such, And I think that's a nice element to sort of, they're taken from the inside out, which is great. I mean, I've got some really good photographs that Twink took, taken from behind the drum kit during a live show. So you see the backs of the band, of us on the stage, and the crowd out in the, all being lit up with the lights, which is not a view you often get when people take photographs of a live band.
As you say, many of those are not stage press shots. They're very natural. They're backstage, unguarded moments. One thing I wanted to ask you about is, in addition to the album tracks that you recorded, there's some great 12-inch B-side tracks, some of which are covers, like Move On Up, and that showed how you could all evolve and challenge yourselves and go into places that originally you didn't necessarily normally go.
Yes, I mean that. As you may or may not know, when we first started off, when we started doing the clubs, we did all covers. We just, and we became very, very good at covering other people's material, and it was a great insight to how other people arrange their songs, and the little things, the musical tricks that they would pull to make that sound they make it sound interesting and etc. And so when Paul found himself pressurized from the record company because of the contracts to come up, well, we need a single and we need it within 6 weeks, and Paul would say, I don't like writing to order. How can you just sort of write a single that I'm going to be happy with as being a single? And that often reared its head. So sometimes we would just look at all the stuff that we had recorded for an album and then just pick any old one. I mean, Tube Station was picked like that for a single. It was the worst one on there. We thought it was the worst single to pick. And we did it almost out of almost out of rebellion to the record company to say, well, look, we're going to give you this one, because it was difficult to record. We couldn't get the arrangement right until the end. So we're just going to give this one to you. But on some occasions, we would throw our mind back to days when we were doing cover versions. David Watts, you think, do you know what? That's a great Kinks song. Not many people know about it. We're good at doing covers. We'll pull that one out of the bag. So that's what we did. So it was nice to sort of rediscover that skill later on, if you like, and just think, well, I love these songs like Move On Up, and there's a few of them dotted throughout our career, but it was really nice to sort of just pull them out and because we could do them easy. That's what we sort of cut our teeth on musically, to sort of do that. So it was just really great to pull on those sort of songs. I mean, that was probably the main reason why we did covers, especially with David Watts, I suppose, was the fact that we didn't have anything else to actually release as a single. So it was a nice sort of filler, if not, well, maybe not filler, but a sort of a bit of relief from having the pressure on Paul to come up with a new song, really.
And also, you obviously have a strong voice in the book as well, and you also get to be clear about the fact that there are some things that people assume are factual that are not. A little bit like the bitterest pill, because some people think about that relates to the band splitting, but that wasn't the case at all, was it?
No, it wasn't. No, the reason I always admired Paul for, he could really look deep into himself and find the reasons for, for writing a song about something. There's sort of numerous occasions. Butterfly Collector was another one that comes to mind, really, when you listen to it, if you know the real story behind those songs. Bitterest Pill had nothing to do with the band splitting or whatever. There were other reasons there. But to sort of wear your heart on your sleeve, I suppose, and just explore that scenario and just write a song about it, I think it's a fantastic talent to be able to do that, because it can be a real dodgy subject sometimes. It's easy to write love songs and etc. But I think that's and I think people relate. Again, I think it's something that people relate to, because it rings true of life in general. These things happen.
Another thing that's clear as well from reading this is that the final single, Beat Surrender, a real feeling that you didn't want to go out in relation to that single on a down note or whatever. It's a real vibrant single that captures you and the group at its best.
Yeah, it was a bit strange all that, because we still had a little cache of songs that Paul had been working on, and we'd done demos for. We were all sort of ready, really, to record, and that was one that we actually wanted to use as a single. But some of them Paul had put in his back pocket and carried on into Star Council, so that they never really sort of surfaced as jam songs, but originated as jam songs. So to pull that one as the last one was a bit odd. But I must admit that it's not my favorite of jam songs, for all sorts of reasons. Maybe I'm too close to it emotionally. Every time I listen to it, I can't listen to that. But yeah, we literally had to have something to fulfill. We had a contract to fulfill. That's why the last album was a live album, because there's no way that, given Paul's persistent in sort of calling it a day on the band, we could never have done another studio album, which is a real shame. It's just, I mean, the other thing I thought about was we could have easily have done a world tour to finish off with, but we didn't. We just decided to put a date on it, the end of 1982, to do what we normally did by doing a UK tour running up to Christmas, and that was it. The offers that were coming through to play in other territories, to go to America or Europe, Japan and stuff, especially Canada. That was their second biggest market for selling records anyway. We just didn't take advantage of at all. And I think that's a bit of a shame that we didn't do that. We didn't go to Northern Ireland, which was, at the time, it was a difficult place to visit because of the troubles that were going on there. But it's just seemed like it was all pulled up a bit too short. We had for only a few months to sort of wind this thing up after, it's like running at 1,000 miles an hour, and then somebody says, "Right, stop," and you've literally got to put the brakes on. You've got to have a completely different attitude to, how you sort of go about things and what have you. So it was a very, very strange time. I always thought that Paul would change his mind. The shows were going so well. The reception we were getting was very emotional on that last tour. That you think, surely you're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater now, but there it was. That was it. I mentioned in the book, this was 10 years of my life, from the age of about 16 to 26, when that was my reason for getting out of bed, was the band, was everything that was put into it. So it was, and I think Bruce felt the same way as well. John certainly did. The band was John's baby. He'd sort of got us all the work in the early days, and did a lot for all three of us up until the point we got signed. So yeah, he was devastated as well. So it was a shock all round. I think Paul was probably the only person on the planet who actually thought that this was a good idea. But there you go. I mean, everybody had their different reasons for wanting the band to continue, except for Paul, and I think his reasons were dubious. But there you go. But like I say, we were grown ups. We could live with that scenario, and we certainly did. I think we stepped up to the mark like we normally did. We did, a great job of playing those last shows and recording the last few things that we needed to record, and to get on with our lives. I mean, I think all three of us are very grateful, I think, for what the Jam did for us. Just for us, as a very sort of selfish way, it sort of set our tone for the rest of our lives, all three of us. So in that respect, we've got absolutely no complaints or no regrets whatsoever. I don't know whether Paul quite feels that way, because he would not talk about the Jam or play Jam music at his concerts or anything after the split. He wouldn't even talk to me and Bruce, which was quite a source of bewilderment for both of us for a number of years, until the penny dropped as to why he wouldn't. But still, it's I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of bands that that sort of scenario has happened to in the past, and I'm sure it will happen again. Maybe there's a little fable in there somewhere. I don't know.
Those last batch of live shows must have been quite emotional in a way, because you had that build up in terms of Paul saying that he wanted to leave in the summer, and then you've got a series of shows and building up to those December shows, and there's some great material that I think got released as extras to The Gift. The live at Wembley, I think 3rd of December, and you playing some older songs like To Be Someone there just sound brilliant. And I think that last show in Brighton, that must have been really strange.
It was, yeah. Normally when we finish a tour, we'd be buzzing about, what was to come, what were the new things that we were going to be doing next, and there wasn't any of that. But I remember looking at the crowd, especially on that particular night, and seeing on the faces of everybody there exactly how I felt. This, that it was almost a sort of disbelief. I mean, the connection we had with with our fans, with Jam fans, was very strong. We didn't take them for granted at all. We certainly didn't at that time. There was no sort of them and us situation, and we always liked to talk to the fans and treat them with just as much respect as I think that they treated us. So there was a very strong connection. I don't know whether that still exists today with Paul. I don't know whether he still tends to. I hear a lot of disgruntled people saying, "Oh, he wouldn't see me. He wouldn't come out and sign my this, that, and the other." So I don't know really whether he still holds those sort of values that the Jam had. But I think one of those values was to be sort of honest and upfront with people about things. And I think this is one reason why it annoys me so much. This sort of fairy story as to why he left. I don't think that's particularly honest, and I don't think it was particularly straightforward with the fans, and because no band is anything without the fans buying the tickets, buying the albums, coming to the shows. And I think if you lose sight of that, you've pretty much lost sight of a lot of things, really. But like I say, I mean, Paul hasn't actually spoken to me at all since. You think to yourself, what on earth did I say? But so I don't think it's necessarily on our side of the fence. I think it's more come from him. There's something odd going on there, and I think a lot of it was probably to do with mismanagement, and I'll just leave it at that. But which was a real shame to sort of have to resort to that to sort of cover things over. But maybe we'll never know Paul's real reasons. But I just know it. I get this gut feeling that the reasons that were given, rubbish, absolute rubbish. It just doesn't sound logical. Sounds nice in a sort of fairy story sort of way, but doesn't bear much in the face of reality.
Just to close, Rick, fantastic book, and I think given you've got the mix of the points from yourself, memories from the people around you, those fantastic photos, and a bit of a setting in relation to the political context and the weather, and what, it really does get you back into 1982. And I do heartily recommend it. I think the special edition's sold out already, so I think it's just the main edition still, which is available. And I do encourage everyone to get it. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no, thanks for saying that, because it's always difficult to know whether it's got the right elements and whether it's done the right things. And but yeah, no, thanks. I mean, I just hope people, Jam fans or anybody who reads it, finds something in it of value. It's because it was an odd scenario. But yeah, no, thanks for letting us do the interview. It's brilliant.
It's a pleasure, and I think maybe that's the theme that comes out then and it comes out now, and why is that connection that 40 years later, that connection is still as strong, especially for the fans that were young and in their teens 40 years ago and now around 60 or whatever. They've still got that memory of that special period of those 5 or 6 years of the Jam as well. Yeah.
I think it's just the fact that we're still talking about it and that people are still interested in it and the records are still selling. Is I have to pinch myself every morning to think, well, wow, because we didn't set out to do that. We set out to be for ourselves. We set out to be a great band. That's that was it. That was all. Just to like playing live and touring, and it's quite a simple sort of ambition as far as we were concerned. So to have it this still being listened to all these years later is just blows you away.
Fantastic. I can't think of no better way to end. Thank you so much again for your time, Rick. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you today.
No, thank you. Thanks very much, Jason.
All right, take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.